Imagine the sound of a gold-toned foil seal peeling back from a fresh jar of Nutella. That iconic nutty aroma hits you instantly, promising a rich experience of roasted hazelnuts and deep cocoa. You dip a spoon in, watching that glossy velvet-like swirl yield to the pressure, and for a moment, it feels like the ultimate indulgence. But if you turn that jar around and let your eyes drift past the inviting illustrations of whole hazelnuts and milk splashes, the reality of the recipe begins to emerge in cold, clinical print. The very first ingredient listed is not hazelnut. It is not cocoa. It is sugar. The second ingredient is palm oil. Only then, in the third position, do we find hazelnuts, accounting for a mere 13% of the total weight. In a standard 400-gram jar, you are looking at roughly 200 grams of pure sugar and 80 grams of refined palm oil. This means that the ingredient providing the product's name, the nut, actually makes up barely 1/8 of what is inside the container. It is a mathematical sleight of hand so profound that in Italy, the very birthplace of this global phenomenon, Nutella cannot legally be classified as a chocolate cream. Because it lacks the minimum cocoa solids required by law, it is relegated to the category of a hazelnut spread. We have to ask how a recipe that began its life as a concentrated 70% hazelnut paste transformed into a mass-marketed commodity that is over half sugar. And more importantly, what the label is trying to tell you about the difference between a confection and a food. The story of Nutella is not one of culinary invention for its own sake, but rather a story of survival and economic desperation. To understand why your spread is mostly sugar today, we have to travel back to 19th century Piedmont, Italy, during the height of the Napoleonic Wars. Napoleon Bonaparte had initiated the Continental System, a massive trade blockade designed to cripple the British economy by forbidding neutral or allied nations from trading with them. This effectively severed the supply lines of cocoa coming from South America to Europe. For the master chocolatiers of Turin, this was a catastrophe. Faced with a dwindling supply of expensive beans, they looked to the hills of Langhe, which were teeming with Tonda Gentile hazelnuts. They discovered that by roasting these local nuts and grinding them into an ultra-fine paste, they could stretch their limited cocoa supply without sacrificing flavor. This blend was named Gianduja, after a popular commedia dell'arte character who represented the spirit of the Piedmontese people. At its inception, Gianduja was a luxury born of necessity, typically containing a staggering 70% hazelnut content. It was thick, earthy, and intensely concentrated. It was a product of the land, using what was abundant to hide what was scarce. By the time World War II came to an end, cocoa was once again a rare and rationed luxury in a rebuilding Italy. Pietro Ferrero, a small-scale pastry maker in Alba, revisited the old Gianduja concept to create an affordable treat for the working class. In 1946, he launched Pasta Gianduja, which was sold as a solid loaf wrapped in foil. Mothers would slice off a piece to put on bread for their children, but the children would often throw away the bread and just eat the chocolate. This led Ferrero to innovate further, searching for a way to make the product impossible to separate from the bread. In 1951, he released Supercrema, a softer, spreadable version. It wasn't until 1964 that his son, Michel Ferrero, refined the formula for the global stage. He chose the name Nutella, combining the English word nut with the Italian ella, a suffix suggesting sweetness and affection. However, as the brand prepared for mass production, the economics of the recipe began to shift. Hazelnuts were, and remain, a volatile agricultural commodity prone to frost and price spikes. Sugar, conversely, was cheap, shelf-stable, and addictive. Palm oil offered a technological miracle. It remained semi-solid at room temperature, giving the spread its signature melt-in-the-mouth quality without the need for dangerous trans fats or hydrogenation. Every step toward global scalability was a step away from the original 70% hazelnut ratio. The journey of a Nutella jar today begins in the hazelnut orchards along Turkey's Black Sea coast, a region that produces roughly 70% of the world's total supply. The Ferrero Company is the single largest buyer of hazelnuts on the planet, consuming about a quarter of the global harvest every single year. These nuts are harvested in the late summer months of August and September, dried in the sun until their moisture content drops below 6%, and then transported to massive processing facilities. Inside these plants, quality control is ruthless. Technicians use a device resembling a miniature guillotine to snap samples in half, peering inside to look for signs of mold, insect damage, or rancidity. Once cleared, the nuts are cleaned and funneled into industrial roasters, where they are subjected to temperatures of approximately 140 degrees Celsius for up to 30 minutes. This roasting stage is where the magic and the risk lies. A raw hazelnut is relatively mild, but heat triggers the Maillard reaction, a complex chemical dance between amino acids and reducing sugars that creates hundreds of volatile aroma compounds. If the temperature is too low, the spread will taste flat and raw. If it is too high, it becomes unpleasantly acidic. After roasting, the skins are whisked away by friction, leaving behind the pale, oily hearts of the nuts. These are ground into an incredibly fine paste, but despite the branding, this paste represents a minority of the jar's volume. In a standard container, you are getting the essence of about 50 hazelnuts, which sounds like a lot, until you realize those 50 nuts are floating in a sea of refined sugar. Sugar makes up roughly 55% of the final product, serving not just as a sweetener, but as a structural bulwark. Then comes the palm oil, comprising about 20% of the jar. This specific oil is chosen because it has a melting point between 33 and 39 degrees Celsius, almost identical to human body temperature. This is the scientific reason why Nutella feels so luxurious. It is solid in the jar, but turns into a liquid the moment it hits your tongue. If Ferrero were to use sunflower oil, the spread would be runny and oil would pool at the top. If they used butter, it would turn into a brick in the refrigerator. Palm oil is the functional glue that allows Nutella to exist as a shelf-stable, year-round product. The manufacturing process involves a technique called conching, borrowed from high-end chocolate making. The sugar, palm oil, hazelnut paste, and a small amount of fat-reduced cocoa powder, about 7.4%, are tossed into massive industrial tanks with rotating blades. For hours, the mixture is folded and sheared at controlled temperatures. This process breaks down the solid particles until they are smaller than 20 microns, which is the threshold where the human tongue can no longer detect individual grains. It is this mechanical refinement that creates the silk texture. To ensure the fats and the solids never separate during their months on a supermarket shelf, soy lecithin is added as an emulsifier. Finally, a touch of vanillin, a synthetic flavor, is added at a concentration of less than 0.1% to round out the profile. At the Alba factory in Piedmont, which remains the largest production site in the world, this process is repeated at a scale that produces 130,000 jars every single day. When you compare this industrial marvel to the traditional gianduja of the 1800s, the contrast is stark. A traditional recipe contains 70% hazelnut and 20% chocolate. Nutella contains 13% hazelnut and 7% cocoa. It is, by weight, more sugar than any other ingredient combined. Yet, for decades, the marketing of the product has leaned heavily into the idea of Nutella as a wholesome part of a balanced breakfast. Advertisements frequently show a mother spreading it on whole wheat toast, next to a glass of orange juice and a bowl of fruit. This marketing strategy eventually caught up with the company in 2012, when a class action lawsuit in the United States alleged that Ferrero had misled consumers into believing the spread was a nutritious breakfast option for children. Ferrero eventually settled the suit for $3 million and agreed to change certain labeling and advertising claims. While the marketing became more cautious, the recipe remained largely the same, focusing on the energy provided by the sugar rather than the nutrition of the nuts. The controversy surrounding the product took a more serious turn in 2016 and 2017. In late 2017, Ferrero quietly adjusted the recipe, increasing the skimmed milk powder and sugar while slightly decreasing the cocoa content. This change was only discovered because a German consumer watchdog group noticed the spread had become visibly lighter in color. This Nutellagate sparked an outcry across Europe, as fans felt the brand was cheapening an already profitable formula. Simultaneously, the European Food Safety Authority released a report regarding palm oil. They found that when palm oil is refined at temperatures above 200 degrees Celsius to remove its natural red color and neutralize its smell, it produces glycidyl fatty acid esters. These compounds are classified as genotoxic and carcinogenic in animal studies. While many other food companies rushed to remove palm oil from their products, Ferrero stood its ground. They maintained that their proprietary refining process operates at lower temperatures and with high pressure, keeping these contaminants at levels far below the safety thresholds. So, how do you navigate the hazelnut spread aisle when every jar looks the same? The answer is hidden in the law of ingredient labeling. In almost every country, ingredients must be listed in descending order by weight. When you pick up a jar of Nutella, sugar is the first word you see. This tells you everything you need to know. The product is fundamentally a sugar-based confection flavored with nuts. However, if you look at the premium or craft section of the store, you will find alternatives that tell a very different story. You will see jars where hazelnut is the first ingredient, often listed at 40%, 50%, or even 60%. These spreads often swap out palm oil for cold-pressed sunflower oil or cocoa butter and use significantly less sugar. The catch, of course, is the price. Nutella typically costs around $6 to $8 per kilogram because sugar and palm oil are incredibly cheap. A 45% hazelnut spread might cost $15 to $20 for the same amount because hazelnuts are expensive. Nutella is not a health food, and it was never intended to be. It is a brilliant piece of industrial engineering that allowed a rare local luxury to become a cheap global staple. It is a triumph of texture over substance. The problem is not the jar itself, but the gap between what we want to believe we are eating and what the chemistry actually says. The original recipe of 70% hazelnut was a response to a world of shortage. Today's recipe of 55% sugar is a response to a world of mass market efficiency. The next time you hold that jar, remember that the label has been telling you the truth for over 60 years. It's a sweet, smooth, and delicious lie that we've all agreed to believe in. But now that you know the ratio, you can decide for yourself if you're buying a jar of hazelnuts or just a jar of very well-dressed sugar. That is the reality of the process. We pull back the curtain on the everyday items you take for granted, showing you the mechanics behind the flavor. If there is another global icon you want us to deconstruct, let us know. Until then, keep reading the labels and trust the process.